And there are, as I said, economic growth today is driven by markets. And which are these markets that you're looking at? You're looking at natural resources. Minerals, oil, natural gas, hydropower are the main revenue drivers of states and of any economy. And this resource dimension is absent from the Finance Commission's ambit, which I find very strange. We are still confined to transactional revenues of a GST or an excise earlier or a sales tax earlier. What is happening to the resources that are being generated from natural resources? Because at the end of the day, even if you were to look at it from that perspective, the riparian laws do spell out how hydropower should be distributed. There are constitutional provisions for how divisions should happen within the state. So how does one account for, first bring it on the table that there are these resources, whether it's hydro, whether it is mines. I mean, I'm sure Karnataka, no one better than you to know what is happening in the mineral sector. You have the MMRDC Act coming in and changing everything. When has royalty become market oriented? Who decides on royalty? Where are these numbers going? Who is benefiting from these? Plus, if this was not enough, then all these natural resource markets are being driven by public sector undertaking, the CPSUs, whether it is the IOC, whether it is the SAIL or GAIL or whoever. Who controls them? Who owns them? Who do they, provide dividends to? IOC getting 90% of revenues from Assam. Assam has no claim on those revenues. 90%, 92% of NHPC's revenues come from J&K. J&K doesn't get one penny out of it. Now, how do we bring in the element of natural resource-driven revenue, which are the key players today, into the ambit of the Finance Commission is where my second point is. That we must bring in the natural resources element into the shareable thing. Only then would it be a fair system in terms of fiscal federalism. Because today, if you look at it, the entire corporate sector in India is a commodity corporate sector, whether it is Reliance, whether it is Adani, whether it is Birla's, they're all commodity corporates coming out of these very markets. Again, all those taxes again are out of the ambit of the state governments. So what is happening is, while one is confined with, and that is the grouse I have with academicians like Professor Govindarao, that they are still stuck in a closed economy model where markets do not matter, where public investment drove everything, and we are still struggling between whether it is a normative approach or non-normative approach. The economic landscape of this country has changed. I see a dissonance between economic growth and sharing of revenues. All, whether it's through regulatory control, whether it's through monetary policy. You see, when you look at it fundamentally from an economic policy perspective, fiscal policy used to drive economic growth in India. As simple as that. Public investment meant growth. I'm making it simplistic. Today, fiscal policy has no elbow room. It's all defined. It doesn't have the same influence. What has is monetary policy. Who decides monetary policy in this country? The central government. Who decides regulatory regime? The central government. So there is an inherent bias in the federal system. Not that it is provided for in the constitution. In fact, the Constitution of India does not even mention the word federalism. It doesn't exist for the Constitution of India. It was a political compromise at that stage which was done. That's another story altogether, how it became federal. But the fact remains that at no stage did the Constitution of India, the only significant change between 1935 Government of India Act and the Constitution, because I believe a large part of the Constitution came from the Government of India Act 1935, only one significant change was made. In the 1935 Act, Government of India Act, it was said, India, the Federation of States. The Constitution changed it to India, a Union of States. That was the abiding change that was made. So at no stage was there any desire to do it. The entire, if you look at the history of evolution of federalism, Then the entire thing changes in 1946 when the cabinet mission plan fails. Till that, 1946, Jawaharlal Nehru presents to the Constituent Assembly a federal structure with states having residuary powers and center having only three areas under its control: defense, foreign affairs, communication, which was the 370 model eventually, which has been now struck down by the Supreme Court. The moment cabinet mission plan failed, partition was announced, Government of India, the Constituent Assembly took a complete relook at it. That objectives resolution of 1946 was ignored and we became a centrist thing. Now post that, in 1991, two events happened. One is economic liberalization, which is 1991 under Manmohan Singh, and second was the third tier of government. Both come at the same time, 91 and 93. That fundamentally changed the way states have functioned. Economic liberalization meant that the states that were well endowed, better placed, got off the rock of their wealth soon. And second was that a lot of revenues got centralized. At the same time, when the third tier comes in, a lot of expenditure responsibilities are passed on to them. So the states since 1991 have been under a pincer, with center squeezing them from the top and the panchayats nibbling at their heels from the bottom. You may land up in a situation where you fundamentally don't need a state government. You can very well have a governor, 4 or 5 advisors, and that's how it will be. And given the randomness in which decisions are being taken on matters which need state's mandate, this day does not seem far enough. You convert states into UTs, you can do whatever else you want, it gets ratified even by the Supreme Court. So the fundamental disconnect is that we are defederalizing India. And I was having a conversation with Professor Kelkar because I believe, I wasn't here, I came in late. He was advocating the whole issue of panchayats being empowered. I see the move of panchayats direct transfers as a move to defederalize India. If panchayats have to be supported, they should come through the states. Don't disempower the states to empower the panchayats. If it is, to my mind, that is centralization through decentralization. It's a perceived notion we are decentralizing. We are not. Today, a state like Tamil Nadu or a state like UP or a state like Maharashtra can take on the central government. Scarcely is there a panchayat that can even look at a state government, forget a panchayat, forget a central government. So let us stick to some of the basics that the Finance Commission has to do. Yes, it has to recognize, it must incentivize setting of finance commissions for individual states, because the diversity, I have worked for the 10th Commission, the diversity in no formula can ever work in an equalizing manner. It's not possible. The country is far too diverse. So you need some flexibilities in terms of managing how to equalize these. And it's not about technicalities, about how you do normative behaviors. It is about real life situations where you are unable to make provisions for public services and the need. For instance, the area of, there's this big theory that's being made about is how, equalizing public services. Now, equalizing public services of provisioning for power in a state like Kerala or Karnataka is far simpler than a state like in Arunachal and J&K, where between households there's so much of gap that you'll have to spend 10 times more. The cost per megawatt in one area of J&K used to be 9 crores or 10 crores, I'm talking of 5 years back, and in other parts it was 4 crores, largely because of the terrain. So the point really being that you cannot have a situation whereby the center bypasses the states. And that's exactly what is happening, bypassing the states. Now, and my apprehension is that what was done to the Gadgil pool could be done to the divisible pool. What was done to the Gadgil pool? Before the resources went to the pool, they were taken out through this notorious kind of network of centrally sponsored schemes and central schemes, which is where I think the 14th Commission had done something absolutely brilliant. They wanted to clean up the whole thing. They raised the share of taxes from 32 to 42. But if you look at it, the overall transfer state never went. It remained at 61%. Because that 10% was going through centrally sponsored schemes. So they had tried to stop that. But that has not stopped. That has continued nevertheless, because that has a certain politics attached to it. So what we are trying, where we are, and that is the final comment I'd like to make, is we are at a situation where we can redesign our fiscal federal structure in light of two things. One, the nature of indirect tax regime has changed, and GST Council is an outstanding example of how legislation was done in consultation with all states. And two, please align the sources of growth with the criteria for devolution, because you cannot disengage the two. The moment you do that, you are disempowering the states, you are bypassing the states, and you are choking their growth potential. Not all states have the same access to market. There are huge historical advantages. But today, with GST showing that revenues are today flowing well, revenues are growing at a pace which even I find difficult to kind of justify where this is happening from. Nevertheless, it's happening. So there is no constraint in terms of what is shared, because the numbers will be very large. You're going to see a huge push in this budget to give freebies and stuff. That is because the fiscal position is very good. So when you have a situation of steady state growth, of good revenues, that's the time to make a definitive change in terms of the entire design and structure of fiscal federalism, which should go beyond equalization of public services and assigning weights to population and income distance. We need a new set of criteria. We need a new framework which recognizes the current realities in the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm sure our young scholars sitting here today will definitely deliberate upon your suggestions and they'll definitely work towards it. Thank you so much. I invite now Professor Vinod Vyaslu, sir, who is the discussant for this session. Sir is presently Professor of Eminence at the School of Social Sciences, Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences. He was the founder and director of Center for Budget and Policy Studies,